A beginner's guide to vibrato on the violin. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a violinist and teacher currently based in New Jersey. I've been playing the violin for over 20 years. I have my bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance, and I'm a Suzuki trained teacher. If you're enjoying my videos, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. And if you're looking for a personal cheerleader along your violin journey, you can check out the different ways to work with me in the description. You can apply for private one-on-one lessons, either here in person in New Jersey or online. I've started many beginners from scratch online and taught people how to play vibrato beautifully, if I do say so myself, or my self-paced flexible online learning program, Learn Violin Online. In this video, I'm going to explain all of the basics of violin vibrato and teach you how to learn it for the very first time. I know vibrato can be scary. I started playing violin when I was 7, and the next year I was 8. It was probably like a little over a year into my violin learning journey, maybe a year and a half. I performed at this thing called a ribbon festival, which is basically like you just go perform and you get comments. And I was playing the Boccherini Minuet from Suzuki Book 2. And I remember all my comments were, is it time to learn vibrato? And my teacher had been trying to teach me, but I was just like, no, I don't want to. It's hard. After that, I finally gave in, but believe me, I understand the fear, the resistance to learning vibrato. It is hard, yes, but not impossible. And as long as you learn it correctly from the very beginning, you'll be fine. I will also say that vibrato is like the icing on the cake. You want the cake to be fluffy and moist and baked well. You don't want the cake to be bad or not there, because no amount of great icing can make up for that. So basically, this is to say you need to make sure that you have your fundamentals down before even attempting vibrato. What do I mean by fundamentals? Well, some of the fundamentals are things like posture, making sure that you're holding the bow correctly, making sure you're holding the violin correctly. Sound, which includes everything from keeping your bow straight, to not hitting noisy neighbors, to not drifting with the bow, and just creating a pleasing sound, not a crunchy sound. Intonation, so that's hitting the right spot with your fingers most of the time, and at the very least being able to identify and quickly adjust when you don't hit the right spot. And I personally also like to teach shifting before vibrato as well. I think that shifting expands the amount of pieces that you can play because it expands the amount of notes that you can play. Vibrato doesn't necessarily mean that you can learn harder pieces. It just means you can make the pieces you already know more beautiful. So please don't rush into vibrato. Like I said, I was playing for like a year and a half before I started using vibrato, and I would say that's about average. With that being said, let's get into the vibrato basics. So there are two different types of vibrato: arm vibrato and wrist vibrato. There's really no such thing as finger vibrato when it comes to playing the violin. Now, I personally believe that one or the other comes more naturally to you. So for me, for example, when I was first learning vibrato, my teacher was trying to teach me wrist vibrato, and I just not getting it. It turns out I have a more natural arm vibrato. So once I started to lean into that, I was able to finally learn how to play vibrato. I personally think arm vibrato is easier because it's a bigger muscle, but that's just me. You could find wrist vibrato easier. Honestly, a lot of my students have found wrist vibrato easier, which is weird to me, but it's fine. It does not matter which type that you choose. Sure, there may be slight differences, slight nuances in the sound, but it's really not, like, you can use either one. Do you need to know both? I mean, maybe eventually if you're like gonna be a soloist with an orchestra or something. I would focus on the one that comes more naturally to you and fully developing that before even thinking about the other one. I know for me, I only used arm vibrato for like literally years. So I started vibrato when I was in elementary school. I think one day randomly when I was in college, I was suddenly like, oh, I can do wrist vibrato too? So it does not matter which one that you use. Next, vibrato is a backwards motion. That means when you're using vibrato, you start on the pitch and then you move your finger backwards. The reason for this is that when we listen, we pick up the highest pitch. So if your finger is going over, the pitch is going to sound like you are playing sharp. Next, when you're using vibrato, the points of contact in your hand change from 3 to 2. So up until this point, you've been touching the violin in 3 different spots. You've been touching it with your thumb, on the inside of your first finger, and then with whatever finger you were using. When you're doing vibrato, you are no longer going to touch the violin on the inside of that index finger. So you're going to move your finger out and create a little bit of airspace so that your hand is free to move. Now, this is one of the major things that I personally messed up when I was learning vibrato, because I thought that space had to be like extreme. I thought it had to be like that, which is just not the case. It's just a very slight amount of space. In creating this space, the position of your thumb can, but does not have to change. For me personally, I don't have a super, big hand. So when I create that airspace, I bring my thumb a little bit more underneath the instrument, which helps, again, give me that airspace. But then it also helps give me a little bit of support. Since I'm no longer touching right there, it feels a little bit risque to have my hand so free. So if I'm holding it a little bit more underneath as opposed to on the side, it just gives me a little bit more support. The basic motion for wrist vibrato is this. So I think a big thing that people get confused about wrist vibrato is that your wrist is not actually moving, right? Your wrist is not bouncing back and forth like that. Your wrist is acting as a hinge for the rest of your hand to move. You can think of it like knocking on a door. And for arm vibrato, this is your basic motion. You're opening and closing with your elbow. This is the same movement as shifting, just on a smaller scale. And as you can see when I'm doing this right now, that my hand and my wrists are moving a little bit too. That's totally fine. I'm just being very loose, very soft. I'm not like tensing my hand up at all. Now, as for your finger, when you're doing that movement, no matter which one you're doing, your finger is gonna roll. So you're gonna start on the tip of your finger and then roll back to the pad of the finger. And again, this can be done with the arm vibrato like that, or with the wrist vibrato like that. Either way, your finger is going to roll. If you're doing wrist vibrato specifically, I suggest practicing up against the instrument at first to prevent your wrist from moving. So you can see that my wrist is on the side of the violin like that, which helps me just use it as a hinge rather than moving it back and forth. The very first exercise that I teach all of my students is something I call the pizza exercise, which is basically just gradually speeding up this vibrato motion with the metronome. First, I suggest practicing it without the bow and then adding the bow in after. I'm going to be playing this at 60, but you can of course change that tempo. You can go slower, you can go faster, depending on where you're at. The first step is quarter notes. So you're moving with every click. And remember, you're gonna start on the pitch and then lower your finger. And you can see that my finger is moving quite a bit, right? It's rolling from this upright position with the knuckle to a more laying down position, for lack of a better word. Obviously, the faster you go, you're not gonna be able to roll that much, but I do recommend rolling as much as you can when it's slower. After the quarter notes, you'll move to eighth notes. And then 16th notes. And finally, as fast as you can. Once you can do all of those steps on all 4 of your fingers, then congratulations, you can do vibrato. Now, I know there might be other issues that come along. Maybe you want to loosen up your vibrato, maybe you want to make it faster, maybe you're not hearing quite a big enough difference in the pitch, but that is the basics of how to learn vibrato and all of the basic principles behind vibrato. I have a complete playlist here dedicated to vibrato where I give more exercises for relaxation, I give tips for your 4th finger, so I'll definitely leave that linked below so you can check that out. And if you have any particular questions about vibrato, leave a comment and I'm happy to answer. The biggest piece of advice I can give you is just to be patient, okay? Like I said, vibrato is not the be-all, end-all, and it will take a really long time to learn. You can expect to learn the basic movement in a couple months, but it really takes years to cultivate a vibrato that you love and are proud of. You can do it though, I promise. Thank you so much for watching, and please make sure you're subscribed before you go.